baby that doesn't breathe, two men who vow eternal love, and a society that doesn't know what to feel. Is it madness, desperation, or a new way to love? Get ready to hear the story that divided the internet, became a viral parenting video, and exposed the taboos of modern parenthood like never before. A gay couple, a fully decorated nursery, and in the crib, a reborn doll. It might sound like a joke, but what you're about to see is anything but. They didn't adopt a child. They adopted what they could, and with that, they built a home, with baby bottles, affection, middle-of-the-night cuddles. Their pain turned into symbolic parenthood. Their affection became scandal. And the question no one could stop asking was, if the baby doesn't breathe, is the love also fake? This isn't just a story about a reborn doll. It's a mirror, one that forces you to reflect. What do you call normal? And does modern love really need permission? They had heard this question more times than they could count. Why don't you adopt a real child? But no one knew the full story. Mark and Andrew, a same-sex couple, had spent years quietly dealing with the pain of not being able to start a family the traditional way. They went through waiting lists, interviews, rejections. But it wasn't just that. The pain of each no, the cold stares, and the weight of social judgment began to leave invisible scars. Then came an unexpected suggestion. Have you ever heard of reborn babies? At first, it would sound crazy to anyone. A reborn doll, a silicone baby. For what, exactly? But what seemed absurd turned out to be a door to something deeper, an emotional connection they had never imagined. Andrew, a therapist, was already familiar with reborn therapy, used with patients dealing with depression, grief, even Alzheimer's. But Mark cried the first time he held that therapeutic doll in his arms. It wasn't just a doll. It was the birth of a new kind of hope, even if made of silicone. And here's the part few are willing to see. What is real? What counts as legitimate love? They didn't have a baby made of flesh and blood, but their desire was so intense, so honest it made the silence scream. Symbolic parenthood began as a way of healing. But they never imagined that this first, seemingly harmless step would shock so many people. And everything truly began. The day they set up their first nursery. It was just like any couple expecting a baby. Mark spent days choosing the wall color, while Andrew got excited about the details. Curtains with little animals, a musical mobile over the crib, a small dresser filled with tiny outfits organized by color. But instead of waiting for a newborn, of flesh and blood, they were waiting for a reborn baby girl, made of silicone, hand-molded, painted with fake veins, and sleeping with half-open eyes. A work of art, or a scandal waiting to happen. They spared no effort. They bought bottles, diapers, towels embroidered with the name Emma. She was the daughter they were never able to have. And now, there in that pink-walled room, she had a real space in the world. But to an outsider, it probably looked like sickness, delusion, or worse, ridiculous. Inside that room, however, lived a kind of love without rules, built from tenderness and absence, yet full of presence, an unconventional parenthood, but deeply devoted. And then came the most symbolic moment. They even installed a baby monitor. Yes, as if she might wake up crying at any moment. And in a way, she did. Because what woke up in them was the instinct, the desire to care, to be fathers. It all felt very real, even if the baby didn't breathe. And it was in that room, scented with baby powder and filled with lullaby melodies, that the first big dilemma was born. To tell people, or not. The first time Mark's sister saw the room, she let out a stifled laugh. "Are you serious?" she asked, raising her eyebrows, like someone watching a bizarre movie scene. Andrew's mother couldn't even hide the disappointment. "You're mocking the idea of being parents," she said, with a tone that mixed disdain and sadness. They heard it all. That they were avoiding reality, that they needed, ironically, therapy, that it was childish. No one wanted to understand what they felt, only to give their opinion. To friends, it became a running joke. WhatsApp messages with dull memes, giggles, sarcastic comments. Some friends disappeared completely, others acted like nothing had happened. Mark tried to explain, "This helps us. This is emotional healing." But who listens when they've already decided to judge? The same phrases came up again and again. "It's just a toy. You're better than this." The cruelest, hearing they were mocking real parenting, as if loving in a different way was an offense to the traditional idea of family. Andrew went quiet for days. The feeling of public humiliation grew with every backhanded comment, every judgmental look on social media. But even amid the societal judgment, they knew they weren't hurting anyone. They were trying to find peace. They were discovering what it meant to be an LGBTQ+ family in their own way. And even as so many doors closed, they chose to open one. A baby shower. The invitation was real. The decorations were delicate. There were diaper cakes, candy tables, balloons, even little boxes with the name Emma written in pink. Tea. And Andrew prepared everything with care. It was their first baby shower, even if it was for a reborn baby. The catch? To most guests, it felt like a prank. People arrived chuckling quietly, exchanging glances. Once they realized it was serious, the awkward laughter turned into second-hand embarrassment. Some tried to hide it. Others simply left before the congratulations. A few recorded mocking stories on social media, adding laughing emojis. But some stayed until the end, even if in silence, trying to understand. Andrew served the guests with a nervous smile. Mark held Emma with such care, as if the whole world might break if he let her fall. This wasn't an event. It was a desperate attempt at emotional connection, a celebration of symbolic parenthood, even in the face of vacant stares. That afternoon, between balloons and chilled pie, they felt the weight of alternative parenthood, a love that doesn't fit into old molds, and for that reason, unsettles people. They weren't playing house. They were trying to build a home. But what began as a dream was about to turn into a storm, because when they shared a short video from that day online, everything changed. Poorly raised. This is what happens when people lose family values. These two just want attention. That silicone baby is just a symbol of humanity's failure. All in the name of decency. All laced with a rotten sense of morality. With each comment, their chests tightened. Andrew didn't leave the bedroom for 3 days. Mark stopped eating. The pain was silent, but brutal. It was social judgment on an industrial scale, and even so, they didn't delete the video. Something told them that behind all the rage, there were also people who needed to see it. People hiding, feeling the same things, but too afraid to show it. They were being crucified, yes, but they were also opening a door. And even scared, they knew they had to respond, just not in the way anyone expected. Because the question that hurt the most was still to come. It came like a stone through glass, always dressed up as good intentions, as if it were simple, as if adopting a child were just filling out a form and waiting. "Why don't you adopt a real one?" they repeated, as if Mark and Andrew were dodging some noble duty. Mark took a deep breath every time he heard it. But the truth is that this one question carried centuries of parenting taboos. As if the only valid forms of love were biological or state-approved. As if alternative parenthood was some kind of freak show. One day, Andrew responded directly in a video. "We tried, and we couldn't." He explained the process, the requirements, the rejections, just for being a same-sex couple. He spoke about the fear of raising hope in a child, only to be rejected by the system. He spoke about waiting years, only to be told they weren't a suitable profile. The internet went quiet. And then, what was already controversial turned into something worse. People saying they were using a reborn doll to play the victim. But the cruelest part wasn't the judgment, it was the dehumanization. As if that silicone baby they cared for with such love were just a pathetic attempt at parenthood. As if what they felt was just pretend. But who decides what's real? A birth certificate, a DNA test, or the way you hold someone in your arms? That's when the deepest question emerged. If the baby is made of silicone, is the love fake too? When Mark held Emma in his arms, he didn't see vinyl, paint, or glued-on eyelashes. He saw a daughter. He saw a version of himself that still believed love, care, and protection were possible, even outside the norm. Andrew always said that baby didn't need to breathe to bring life back into the house. That reborn baby, the one so many called just a doll, gave them the chance to feel something pure again. Is that less real simply because it's different? The truth is, their love for Emma was full of presence, even without response. They dressed her, rocked her to sleep, and even without crying, they responded. It was like loving someone who would never say, "I love you" back, and still loving them anyway. A deep exercise in devotion, empathy, and acceptance. Symbolic parenthood, yes, but not less intense. A modern love, not because it's trendy, but because it dares to exist where no one wants to look. This was never about silicone. It was about affection, about rebuilding with what you have. While many saw an object, they saw meaning. Because sometimes what sustains a home isn't paperwork, but what you do when no one's watching, and it was exactly when they decided to take Emma out in public that the judgment reached another level. The first time they pushed Emma in a stroller through the street, Mark was shaking. He felt the weight of every stare, a silent judgment, even before anyone said a word. It was just a walk in the park, but for them, it was practically a political act, a gay couple, pushing a stroller with a silicone baby inside. The perfect recipe for side eyes, muffled laughter, phones sneakily filming. Their courage wasn't about facing the street. It was about facing the disguised ridicule. Andrew, more composed, tried to stay calm. He sat on a bench, picked up Emma, and began rocking her gently. A woman approached, looked at the baby, smiled, and then froze. "Oh, she's not real." The smile faded into a sigh. "It's just a doll." The same phrase, always the same. What no one saw was what happened after those walks. The emotional exhaustion, the effort to keep their heads high while the world screamed they were crazy, the reality of being judged for loving. And even so, they didn't stop. Because between the grocery store and the shopping mall, someone would always approach with kindness. "She's beautiful," a woman once said, without asking a thing. And for a moment, there was peace. But it wasn't always like that, because the worst didn't come from strangers. It came from inside their own home. From the night Mark nearly gave up on everything. It was a normal night after a walk downtown. Mark was silent, eyes lost in the ceiling, while Andrew folded Emma's clothes. The silence was deafening. Suddenly, Mark spoke. "Maybe we should stop." The words came out soft, but they cut like a knife. He was exhausted. The public humiliation, the negative reactions from society, the weight of always being the weird one. It was all too much. "I just want to live in peace," he said, without having to explain everything all the time. Andrew felt the floor drop from beneath him, because if Mark gave up, it would all collapse. He tried to argue. He reminded Mark of how this experience had saved them both from greater silences, from empty nights, from a grief that had no name. This is what kept us standing." But Mark didn't answer. He just cried. The kind of silent cry only those who've been judged for loving know. That night, Emma stayed in her crib, untouched, for the first time in months. But before bed, Andrew held Mark's hand and said, "If we stop now, who else will feel alone?" And that one simple question reignited something. Because they weren't alone anymore. The viral video, even with all the hate, had also reached people who were hurting. People who felt the same, but never had the courage to say it. And it was one of those people who sent the message that changed everything. It was an ordinary morning. Andrew's phone buzzed with a new notification. A direct message from a stranger. He almost ignored it, but something made him open it. It was long. It began like this. I was going to end my life today, but I saw your video with Emma, and I cried. For the first time in months. Mark read the message in silence, his eyes filled with tears. That moment, that lit-up screen, proved there was something much greater behind this story with a reborn baby. The message went on. She said she'd lost a child 2 years ago, that she never truly returned to life after that she'd started using a reborn doll as part of her emotional healing, but felt ashamed. I thought it was madness until I saw you two show it without fear. That message wasn't just a thank you, it was a hug. It was confirmation that the love they felt, no matter how misunderstood, was necessary. That symbolic parenthood can, in fact, save lives. Mark and Andrew read the message together, over and over, each word a breath of relief. For the first time in a long time, they didn't feel wrong or alone. Yes, they were hurting, but they were also inspiring, showing that modern love means seeing beyond blood. And when they agreed to do an interview about all of this, they had no idea the backlash would be even worse. It was an innocent invitation, a podcast about affection, families, and new ways of living. Mark and Andrew agreed because they wanted to tell their truth, unfiltered, undistorted. They spoke about alternative parenthood, about what it means to love without expecting anything in return, about the pain of not fitting into the traditional mold. It was a beautiful conversation, light, emotional, even joyful. But the moment the episode went live, the internet exploded. In less than 24 hours, they were being cancelled. Clips from the interview, taken out of context, became ammunition. Gay couple says doll is better than real child. They prefer plastic over adoption. Comments poured in. People outraged, making reaction videos with disgusted faces. Influencers using their names for clicks. Once again, the LGBTQ+ family was reduced to ridicule. What was meant to be a space for empathy became a stage for judgment. The most painful part, seeing old friends sharing those videos, people who knew their story, who knew the emptiness, the pain, how much reborn therapy had meant to them. All of it discarded for likes. Mark thought about deleting everything. Andrew thought about disappearing. But before either of them could act, came the most uncomfortable question of all, not from themselves, but from the interviewer. What if you were straight? An interview that kept echoing afterward. People don't want us to love differently. They want us to stop loving. And that's exactly what so many tried to make them do. But what no one expected was the response they would give in the end. A simple, direct sentence that made many people pause, and others slam the door on their way out. Mark looked into the camera. Andrew's hand held his. Emma was there, in his arms, dressed in the onesie they had bought during the first month. His voice was steady, but his eyes were filled with tears. Our baby may not breathe, but our love is real. The silence that followed was louder than any scream of hate, because it was impossible not to feel something. Pain, shame, connection, anger, confusion. Misunderstood love has that power. It either touches you or it frightens you. The phrase traveled the world. Some shared it with heavy hearts, others mocked it. But no one walked away unaffected. It was impossible to hear those words and not be pulled into your own reflections about what is normal, about what is family. Because there, in front of the camera, stood a couple redefining what it means to be a parent. A couple showing that unconventional parenthood is also built on commitment, routine, affection, and a great deal of courage. And that's where the dilemma comes in. You can laugh, you can look away, you can write a furious rant in the comments, but there's one thing no one can deny. They loved. They loved with everything they had. They loved despite the world. And now the question is, will you keep judging or will you start feeling? So, what about you? What really defines a family? Is it blood, a signed document, or is it what's built through presence, through care, through love, even when the world calls it madness? Mark and Andrew were judged, ridiculed, and attacked for something that, in the end, said only one thing: we want to love. And maybe that's what scares people the most. The idea of someone loving outside the rules, loving without needing an explanation. Because true love was never about fitting in. It's about overflowing. Now we want to hear from you. What did this story make you feel? Have you ever loved in a way the world didn't understand? Leave a comment below. Share it with us. This community exists for that, so we can see ourselves in each other, so we can feel less alone. And if you want more real, powerful, thought-provoking stories, give this a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We're just getting started telling the stories no one else dares to tell.